we're ready.
Okay. I'll call to order a meeting of the Houghton City Council for Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. Would everybody please stand and join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the second item on our agenda is the roll call, and as I look, I see that all councilors are present for this meeting. Review and approval of the agenda.
May I add one item E, new fire department member.
Oh,
Man, we're stacking, man. Yeah.
is this E now or under new business?
That would be E, yes.
All right. Anybody have anything else to add at this time? Okay, we'll go with what's before us. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the council at this time? Sure, would you come up and identify yourself?
Craig Waddell from Houghton, and just a couple of things. I went to the Houghton County Commission meeting last night, and I thought there was some interesting things happening there that are different from the way things happen here, and so I thought I'd mention a few things. Well, one thing I noticed is the commissioners were actively adding items to the agenda, which doesn't often happen here, from the city councilors adding items to the agenda. Secondly, they had public comments, both at the beginning for things that are on the agenda and at the end for things that are not on the agenda. They discussed a request to continue or begin again with Zoom meetings, which they unanimously agreed to as a gesture toward transparency, and I hope maybe the city would consider that as well. The commissioner appointments were made by the full commission rather than by the mayor with the approval, and one of their committees was the mental health commission. And I mentioned last time that I've talked with a lot of people because I'm getting my qualifying petition signed. And I really think the whole subcommittee structure might be re-examined. I'm guessing those things occurred over time as something was needed to be done. They were added. And it's like in Florida, they had on the books for quite some time a law that you can't tie an alligator to a fire plug. You know, so maybe some of those committees. So, one of the people that I talked with, who actually isn't a resident of Houghton, but he's a first responder, and he told me that it's not well, covered the extent to which opioid addiction is a problem in the area, and so they just reappointed their mental health commission. I thought something like that might be something to be added to the city of Houghton's committee structure. So maybe to reconsider the structures. Last time I was impatient for a variety of reasons, but one thing I wanted to say is a comment I made. I made a statement of fact that then led to a request. The statement of fact was there was no email message letting people know that there was a planning commission meeting at which Pat Coleman would present his conclusions. So that was a statement of fact, no question about it. I had confirmed that fact before the meeting. I then made a request that you ask him to come back to a city council meeting to present again, given the amount of interest there was, and that you publicize it well so that people might know that it's there, and hopefully they will come. To say that I made accusatory comments when I made a statement of fact, a basic distinction in discourse is between various kinds of comments that one might make: an accusation, a lie, a promise, a threat, a statement of fact. I made a statement of fact and then made a request. Those are two different categories of statements. That's why I got agitated at the meeting, because that's happened before and I don't like it. Second thing is I've talked with Anne when I came to pick up my FOIA request results, 3 of which were denied, by the way. And I said, nothing that I've had to say is directed at the staff. And it's directed at the city council or to the city council. I tried to advise and suggest things you might do to change structures, because when there are problems, if you change the structure, sometimes you can solve the problem. If you can't agree about changing the structure, then that suggests that maybe people need to change. Anyway, I haven't, so, anything, when someone then defends the staff, I haven't said anything critical of the staff. I'm asking about the city council. You're the elected officials. You're the ones who were chosen by the people to represent the people. So I think the last thing I'll ask is maybe if I have time. Mary, do I still have a few minutes, or am I out of time?
No.
Okay. A series of questions, and even if the answers to these questions are all staff rather than council, I would still say the council instructs, advises, inspires, directs the staff. So January 13th, 2021, for the first time, an item was added to the agenda. It's been there every time since then, future agenda items. Can anyone tell me who added that and why?
Actually, I did.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, all right,
Yeah,
all
that's
right.
city manager.
Right, okay, so then the question is, what's become of that? Because I've looked at every set of minutes since then, and I can't see much has actually been added to the future agenda as a consequence of that having been added. So just to point it out, who decides what correspondence? I know who reads the correspondence, but who decides what will be read and what will not be read?
Will you read everything, don't you?
No, I mean at the opportunity for the petitions and communications section of the agenda.
Yeah,
We
Who
do
decides?
read everything that is addressed to the city council for sure.
Yeah.
And then if Eric receives something, or if I receive something that we think is pertinent to hear, we will also add that.
Okay, because over the course of the past 14 months or so, I've submitted numerous things to the city councilors that have never been read. So just leave that. Who decides what will be posted on the Houghton's email list of approximately 1,400 members, general@cityofhoughton.com? I know, I don't care who actually posts it, but who decides what will get posted there? Because
Yeah, I think that's a team effort. As far as if something's happening or something comes up, please get this out on the email list.
okay, because we've just been through a 3-year traumatic experience for the city. I'm sure it's mostly traumatic for those of you as a consequence of the way that the deck issue has been addressed. And that's gone to the Planning Commission. We just had reappointed 2 planning commissioners, and there was nothing. I mean, I didn't hear mentioned that 2 commission positions were expired. It's not on the website. If you go and look at the list of the commissioners, it doesn't say when they began, when their term ends, who they represent, what are the various things they represent. There was an article in the November 12th, I have here with me, a Gazette, a little article on page 5. That's all. I mean, so for something that important, when you put out ads to that list of 1,400 people, because we have a heavy equipment operator needed, but nothing about 2 positions, the chair and the co-chair of the Planning Commission not mentioned. You had 1 applicant, and even in the agenda packet, there were no applications from the 2 who currently hold those positions. Is that proper? I mean, when people come up for a council reappointment, are they not going to have qualifying petitions and get 40 signatures like everyone else? So if you're already in a position, you don't have to apply? Because there was only 1 applicant who withdrew beforehand, and I talked with her, and she said she thought there was no chance that she would be appointed, so she withdrew. So I'll stop. I mean, I could go on, honestly, I was happily in retirement. I had no plan to run for city council. I was working on a book, I was working on home improvement projects, I was educating myself about local geology, And I thought if I made suggestions to you, certainly you would see the wisdom of those. Some of you talk about being engineers and being database. I backed everything up with data. Go look at those messages, everything, links, and not only have to trust the data, you can click on the link and go directly to the source, research into data information. And it's just been ignored. I mean, it's not as, when I said I wasn't going to talk to the city council any longer, it's not as someone implied because I'm thin-skinned and someone said something nasty to me, which they have, or that whatever. I mean, it's because it's like there's no point in continuing to talk to people who never accept anything you have to say. I can only think of two things that I've offered that have come up in discussion. One was the crossing of Montezuma, and that was pretty well dismissed. And the other one was the rules of procedure, which were voted down. And then there was a second thought about going to a committee, and then the committee has never reported back on what they decided about proposed change in the rules of procedure. First, I was told it was not detailed enough, so I wrote a 13-page document describing the need for change in the rules of procedure, and that was just ignored. So why would people come and present? So this is probably my last time, and the next thing you'll hear from me is probably going to be campaign literature, because there's no point in talking to people who just don't do anything as a consequence of hearing public testimony.
Right. Is there anybody else who would like to address the council at this time?
I would just like to briefly address what Craig just said.
I'm sorry.
I would like to address part of what Craig just said.
I'm sure.
Doing this over here. Thank you, Craig. I guess I'm interested in possible improvements on rules and procedures in the council. I know we did send that to a committee, and I was considering when that's going to get brought up again. People have asked me about bringing stuff up and how do they get things done in town, and I would like to know that too.
How to get things done in
How
town.
to get things done, I usually tell them to call Erica.
Yeah, we have huge staff to get things done in
Yeah,
town, that's
no,
for
they
sure.
get things done, they do. Anyway, okay, that's it.
Okay. All right, moving along. Petitions and Communications.
We have a letter from Mary Kaminsky of Houghton. I'm writing this time to ask that you stop using chemical. It's to address to Eric. I'm writing this time to ask that you stop using chemical fertilizer anywhere, but especially along the water on Lakeshore Drive. I ran into it last summer and was gagged, then surprised that we actually use this here. There are so many other methods of organic material to use, more than compost, and some are sold at Swifts. The chemicals currently being used wash right into the canal, poisoning vegetation and marine life, and create toxic algae blooms. It also contributes to warmer water, as you know. Additionally, any structure that may get erected along the waterfront could produce the same ill effect with a monster of concrete and asphalt that absorbs heat and then releases it to the environment and water. The Pier project could be modified with a lighter tone of asphalt to be less absorbent, and a great example of doing the right thing for the sake of nature. As a civil engineer, you know this, and taking action with foresight in mind is my suggestion. I do know your take on it, as you shared this with me in our pre-city council meeting last month, that we are only here for a short time compared to eternity, but this is exactly the type of thinking which has allowed humans to be so destructive in the last 100 years. We have done more damage to the planet in essentially one generation than at any other time in the history of the world. I have an abundance of science to back these claims, so if you'd like to see them, I would be happy to make copies for you. I care about the environment, and my only salvation is knowing that the planet will survive. Humans will not, and we are already experiencing our exodus due to our lack of intelligence with health and development, or maybe it's just a lack of discipline when things come so easy. Between you and me, stop using the chemicals and employ safer alternatives. Secondly, renovating existing structures is by far a better approach from an environmental standpoint. And lastly, modifying current plans can also provide beneficial to our previous precious surroundings. And that's it.
That's it? Okay. Moving along, public hearings, there are none. So we will now go to reports. City manager.
As far as public works, they've been, of course, plowing and sanding, and actually had to start widening in a few places. We've got some new drivers, and we've had to, they're reteaching everybody again. We've had 2 retirements here in the last 6 months, so we've got some new drivers out there. So everybody has been very patient, but I still think they're doing a great job on the roads. So even though we've had this little respite here for a day. mentioned previously, the skating ribbon's open, getting a lot of use down there. It's got some lights on it this year, so again, just, I know Amy was pushing that out on Facebook and a few other things, so glad that's open and people are enjoying it now. And just keep our fingers crossed that the weather holds, which would be for the West Houghton rink as well, as long as the weather holds, people can skate. Baco Construction was working on the Phase 3 water and sewer is actually going to be back here later this week. There was an issue at the bottom of Clark Street at Townsend Drive with a sewer that they're going to be here to fix, but it shouldn't affect traffic or anything like that. But they're going to be back this week to fix something that was kind of discovered, a month and a half later type of thing. And, this time of the year, Public Works is pretty much daily monitoring frost depth. Frost is only down about 2.5 feet right now. We've got a couple of, a handful of services in town which are our early freezers. We've put those people on let run, but that let run, everybody think back to 2014. We're not even close to that yet. The frost is still fairly high in the ground. It hasn't penetrated yet, but we're monitoring it. And if those conditions do come about, even with the cold weather we had over the weekend here or into the beginning of the week, we're still in good shape as far as frost depth. So wanted to get that out there. Other things, the pier, they're actually kind of in the home stretch right now for getting the pilings put in on the north side of the library. Might only be another week or two, and they'll be done with pile driving operations for the winter and then come back later on in March and start working on other things. The only issue we're running into right now is the east end toward the Lakeshore Center. There are some AT&T cables, there's about 7 of them which go under the canal, and we repeatedly asked AT&T to locate those so we don't drive a pile through them, so to speak, and they haven't located them yet. So there's about a 7-foot swath there that, they're just not going to, we might have to come up with an alternative design. So we're still working with AT&T on that. It's just unfortunate because, this has been in the works now for almost 2 years, and kind of they've known about this for 2 years, but they haven't gone and located those cables for us yet. So we'll still keep working on that. I got some preliminary maps of the construction plans from MDOT for the next year plan. It's this year. This year is 22 plan, and then out through 2027. And the good news for the city of Houghton is Townsend Drive is the only big MDOT job in the city for the foreseeable future. I kind of mentioned that before, but I got the actual maps to look at. The next big job on the bridge looks like they're going to, in about 2 years, replace the elevators, which go up to the towers, which shouldn't impact traffic the way they just did. And then following that, and it's not even on here yet because it hasn't been scheduled, it's going to be time to paint it again. So that's quite a ways out there. So just want to share that right now. Last week we had an initial meeting with MEDC's Redevelopment Ready, the Redevelopment Services team. These are the people that are going to help us with technical assistance or funding for things. Kind of that initial meeting after we did a walk through town just so they could get to know us. Dan, the guy from Redevelopment Ready Services team, he's been to Houghton before, but to take that walk through downtown, this is here, that's there type of thing. We did that, so that's kind of our first help session with them, and as we go along here, so they shared examples of other assistance that they've given other redevelopment ready communities throughout the state. That kind of an example, you could do this, you could do that. They could help with the master plan, they could help with zoning, they could help with technical assistance, getting a project going, like hiring an architect or a consultant to get a project moving forward. So we're going to keep working with them, and as these opportunities start to gel, we'll talk about them some more. But one thing that they're going to want to get in the very beginning is what are the city's redevelopment priority areas? And of course, we couldn't not talk about the parking deck at that meeting, but that was certainly one of them. So we're gonna gel those areas into 3 to 4. These are priority areas for the city to look at redevelopment, so their team can see those areas, get to know them, and then try to figure out what they can help us with. And that's public and private. So possibly private, a private property owner that wants to do something, we can connect them with MEDC to see where they can maybe jumpstart redevelopment of some private property somewhere. So we'll keep working toward that. As for the parking deck, we did have a couple of sessions. Mr. Coleman did speak at the Planning Commission meeting. That wasn't his final report. That was more of a sharing of the thing. He's not done yet. So that will be coming. But, in regard to the parking deck, really in the next 30 to 60 days, this council is we're going to have to start having a conversation about when, how we pay for things, how we might leverage other opportunities which have come up with this. And that's going to be the council, the DDA, the Planning Commission, all involved. So we've got a busy couple of months coming up ahead of us here, not to mention budget time and all kinds of things going on. But we've got to start that conversation now, because some things are going to take time. For instance, if the city had to obtain funding, say a bond, you don't just order one of those off the street. Those things take time. So we want to have that conversation about outcomes and timelines and being able to leverage other opportunities. So be prepared for a lot of long PowerPoints of things you might have already seen coming up here soon. Last month, was it last month? Yeah, last month, right before our last meeting, MEDC got a hold of us to let us know that Houghton was chosen for one of those Match on Main grant programs to small business. Now, I knew about that before the meeting, but MEDC told me not to say anything until they got their kind of their ducks in a row, and then they issued a press release the next day, and we were all gone. So I wanted to let you guys know. Garrett already reported on it, but we did, Good Times Music did receive a Match on Main grant from MEDC, which is going to provide assistance for infrastructure and different things in their building. So we're waiting on a grant agreement from them right now, but we're simply the fiduciary on that and keeping track of the paperwork, and then that's going to go to direct assistance to a small business, Good Times Music downtown. That's something we applied for during the fall. Just a couple more things. The sign on Sharon Avenue, the one that's not there anymore. Right now the sign's not there, but we've received some notoriety due to a press release regarding the sign from the owner, which has been reported on in the media, but we're still working with our attorney. Our attorney's working with their attorney to resolve this the way it should be resolved. So I just wanted to let everybody know that, because we're getting inquiries from all over now once that press release went out, and why we're picking on them, kind of things. But it's an interesting narrative, to say the least. So we'll keep working on that. And next meeting, also plan to have it generated before the meeting for discussion at the meeting, kind of a 2021 year-end roundup, code enforcement, significant things in 2021. So we'll have that for the next meeting. There, any questions anybody has on anything?
Anything on Meyer?
Can't get away from Meyer. No, there's nothing from Meyer, and from what the last thing I read, they're not talking about, well, they're going to do one here and not in Houghton type of thing. It's just, I'm sure, again, they're really looking at their business model and that level of investment, considering, how the pandemic's really changed shopping, for that matter. So keeping an eye on it, but nothing new for them.
Two quick things, Eric. So regarding AT&T and their cables down there that are in the way of our project, so what is educate us. What is their obligation? We have a project we want to do on our property, and
It's,
they have,
it's a very interesting, and I know where you're going. So they're obligated, and there's all these arcane public right-of-way rules regarding dry land. And then they get fuzzy when you get off of land. So we're playing that game with them right now, trying to get through that. But the issue is, they said, boy, this would have been a lot easier to do when the weather was warm. And it's like, that's why we told you about it
2 years
before,
ago.
and that's why we asked you in May. That's why we talked about it in July, and here we are in January. So, there's a couple of different ways to look at that. We could possibly modify the design some to span over those, and, the net result is the same thing, it's just constructed a little differently. But again, it's been very frustrating.
yeah, I was just really curious about their obligation here, and I had an idea in my mind that it was probably something to do with land versus not, because I'm very familiar with misdig calls and marking of utilities when it comes to digging on land.
Yes.
So we're all, I'm sure, anxious to see how this plays out, because if it adversely affects the project in its final product and or cost, that'll be frustrating.
We're gonna have a pier when it's done. And it'll be substantially what we expected when it's done. It's just how we get there right now, and we're still working on that with them.
So that wasn't as quick as I thought, because I'm usually longer-winded. Final thing, signs, I just wanted to suggest to my fellow councilors, because signs in the city are a social media topic right now because of that large sign. Don't just blindly believe the things that people type into a comment field. We have record of people who have put up signs, submitted sign applications, sign permit applications, have asked for variances, put up signs that were before ordinance was changed, so they were grandfathered in, all of those things. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. People start to assume that every sign that doesn't adhere to the current sign ordinance must be in violation and has to be taken down. That's not the case. I've been doing this long enough to know there are a lot of exceptions along the way.
Well, and again, there was a press release put out.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it was very carefully worded
Oh, yeah.
to elicit certain reactions
Oh, yeah.
of people. And, how we address that long term, again, we want to, if we're going to do this, we want to do this right. That's why we didn't just start taking things down when they were in violation of the ordinance in the first place.
Right.
Well, I must have missed all that. Did we take the sign down?
No,
Did
they took the sign down.
And then it was taken.
We advised the owners of the sign, which again, the owners of the sign versus the owners of the stanchion, there's all these legal subtleties in there, but we advised the person on the MDOT permit of the ordinance violations, that particular placement of the advertisement there was about 6 violations of various city ordinances there, and notified them, please show us some sort of documentation that, because for all intents and purposes, what we can tell right now, until we get conclusive proof from the title work, is that sign is sitting on city property, actually. And, when you really look at it, previously, well, why didn't you do something about it before? Well, everything that was on that before, first of all, it was there for a long, long time, some of it, and none of it was in violation of our ordinances. And that's what essentially, we have to take care of this, because if we're just going to let this go, what's next? It was one of those things, it tripped it. And honestly, if it would have been a sign for a pet store, a daycare, anything, the sign and the way it was put up still violated a whole bunch of ordinances. Because that's been one thing. Oh, it's just because it says this. No, wouldn't have mattered what was on it.
Well, I was just curious to know if they just did this in response to your request that they.
They expressed it, I believe it was an act of good faith.
Oh, okay. Well, that sounds nice.
Doesn't it though?
Perfect.
Okay.
Go ahead, Brian.
I just have a quick question, just about just generally, it's January, it's a new year. I was just wondering, I'm always thinking about how I think that this city will grow a lot. Is there anything that would make the city of Houghton change its city limits because of growth or something? Is there a factor or something that would ever go into that as far as like we gotta constrict or expand our city limits? I'm just curious, it's a general question.
Well, I mean, realistically, we have a defined set of city limits, and outside of that is someone else's corporate limits, be it a township, well, the township in this case. And expansion of the city limits would take a cooperative effort between the city and that other unit of government, presumably for mutual benefit.
Yes.
So we certainly can't just make the city bigger because we think we want to grow. So, you know, something like that's got, it's something that can be planned for, but then there's differences between city utilities, city ordinances, all those things, and those outlying areas. And again, that's something where there's generally, if we, everybody used the word annex, and I'm just going to use that as a very loose term right now. That annexation is generally brought on by both units of government being able to get some benefit out of that. So, you know, those opportunities exist, say, with the Meyer store, where bringing the city utilities and whatnot, there was a section of that property for the Meyer store, I'll bring it up again, Bob, which were in the township, which in order to compile that into a single piece of buildable, zonable property was done under Public Act 425 and brought into the city under a contract between us and Portage Township for mutual benefit.
That answers my question. So if there's a major commercial enterprise that's sitting between on the straddling two townships or cities, that would be a possible 425 agreement.
Again, it's certainly possible. The short answer is yes, but then, you know, there's got to be also got to be a compelling reason to do so.
Thank you.
Anything else for Eric?
Shout out, Eric, to the Public Works for keeping this back streets of Houghton 2 lanes wide. Ambulances have to get to senior citizens, and they've done a great job in the past week and a half keeping 2 lanes wide in West and East Houghton. Better than I've seen it in the past years. Like Ryan and the guys are doing an excellent job. I know they've been getting some complaints because they're pushing the banks back a little farther, but when it comes to bringing an ambulance to a senior citizen's home or any place or a police car, having the streets too wide makes a huge difference in West, Central, and East Houghton. So shout out that the boys, they're getting complaints. I know I've heard from them, tell them they're doing a great job, but I think anyway, when they see the plow drivers out there pushing those banks back, that's the safety for all of us, children, senior citizens, so you can get an ambulance to your house. So tell them thanks. For a man who's not a senior yet.
Anything else for Eric? All right, moving along, police department.
All right, it's been a while since we met. I actually have a longer report than usual for whatever reason. Since we met on December 15th last, we have taken 219 calls for service. During that time, we made 3 felony arrests, 19 misdemeanor arrests. We issued out 18 civil infractions, and 4 city tickets. We had 22 calls for health and safety, and we had 30 accidents. So that's almost a month. That's almost just barely two accidents a day. For this time of year, we're doing pretty good. Our officers did participate in No Shave November/December now, and that is where we allow the police officers to grow beards, which they think is the funnest thing in the world. We have Ben Rohan, and that wins it every year. And some of the guys really actually struggle. But we did raise $180 for that, which we donated to the Project Lifesaver. That's gotten a lot of press. We've actually had some high-profile cases here with people with Alzheimer's or where they have lost their way and have gone out. So now there's a life-saving program that you can get a bracelet, and it's a rechargeable, and it's something that you can put it on a loved one, and that way, if they go astray and they wander off somewhere, it has GPS, and they're able to find them. Lieutenant Charlie Klein from the Houghton County Sheriff's Department kind of spearheaded that. I think he got a grant from the Porch Health Foundation. And what they also did is they can, if people can't afford the service, it can be paid for that. So if you had something, work for somebody with that maybe has autism, or somebody that may just have a potential to wander and not be able to find their way back. So that's a great program. We're glad to give to that. And from here on out, they need to shave. We were able to take on a new part-time officer, Officer Jet Heenanen. Will be starting his training coming up here soon. So we're excited to have him on board. We met with the Houghton schools today, and of course the Houghton schools have had a lot of changes. Mr. Hill is now the superintendent. Mrs. Scullion is now the Houghton High School principal, and Mr. Klein has moved to the elementary school. We met with him on just school safety, how we address lockdown procedures. We did assist them with their lockdown procedures today. And I gave them my usual speech. We talk on a regular basis, and the principals know when they call me with a problem, the first thing they address is if my kid is involved or not involved. I only have one kid left, so I don't get as many calls with them being involved. But we do like to stay very close with our schools. We have reestablished an office back up there. There's even some talk that maybe if they could secure some funds for a school liaison officer, there's been a push again for that. We'll see if they can secure those kind of funds. That'd be something down the line. But it was a good meeting. It's good. They have a lot of good folks up there working. We enjoy working with them. We have had continual meetings with Power DMS, which is a new software that we package that we purchased with that grant for accreditation. That's going to be a very large thing that we're taking on. We're going to have to keep working with that. Polly's been really busy. It's at the beginning of the year, and she's been having to give out everybody their permits. She does a lot of pre-work on there, getting people's packages, and a lot of what we do, even with our parking enforcement, is we're not really trying to enforce parking as much as we're trying to sell permits. And then, of course, the permits go back towards paying for the plowing and stuff like that for the parking decks. She's been hard at work with that. And to address something Mr. Waddell had said, Lieutenant Roberts is on the mental health board. He's been having boards. He's actually on that and the Dial Health board. And we do work very extensively through that and through Upset with opiate addiction problem. That is a huge problem in this area. We take it very seriously. And we do try to work with their mental health very closely on that. And he just came up, he just did get on that board, but he is working with them, and that is an extension of the city. And as so well, I think as an extension of the city too, is I thought we did work together on that Montezuma, trying to get it at least painted better, and we didn't get all the answers right that you wanted, but I thought we were trying to work together to get forward.
Can I just respond? Yes, that's absolutely right. Yes. The committee came back and reported that because of the
Lack of warmth.
MDOT regulations, nothing could be done, but then we talked, and yes, I sent a letter, I read a letter here. Yes, very much appreciated the crosswalk painted. Thank you.
And we have been starting to work with the Coast Guard to get the security plan updated for when we start receiving ships here. It's very, so after 9/11, a lot of things changed as far as any kind of intake from any foreign countries. So now that we have ships coming in and that they're, even if they come right from Duluth, we still have to have security measures to take them in. And they have to be regulated by the United States Coast Guard, which they have a lot of regulations that we have to follow. We were able to dig up the old plan that we had from maybe 2009. I was able to track down the original author. Of course, it's not electronic. It's just a folder, so we got to hopefully get it electronic so we can update that, and it has to be submitted to the Coast Guard 60 days before a ship comes in. So, that's what's been happening at the Houghton Police.
I have heard of many nice comments on the amount of money that was given by the fraternity. Back in December, you put, I think, from their October
Yep.
Halloween, yeah.
They do that Halloween, yeah, that was, they do that annual, the money that goes, comes right back to the pigs and heat, which we give back out. And I'll give a shout out too, that I was talking about the West Edwards rink, the DUs have been doing that rink for almost 20 years, they come. But the hard thing about it is we have to go on tech schedule, so they're gone for Christmas, but now they're back. They'll be busy with Winter Carnival stuff, but they have been able to get up there and start flooding it and doing some of the work, which is a great asset to the city because you get your parking taken care of. So I appreciate that.
Anything for John?
Yeah, John, your officers still all have Narcan on them, don't they?
We carry Narcan not on us.
In
We
the
carry
cars.
it in the cars.
Sorry, right, that's what I thought.
Yep.
There's also, I believe it's also on the fire trucks and very well. That group was very much helping train a lot of people with Narcan, which is how you stop an overdose from this happen.
And actually, a lot of the
So lots of mistakes too also. Like
they've been
seniors.
provided to the public too.
Yes.
So a lot of people have Narcan.
We are educated in some ways.
Go ahead, Brian.
I was just curious, have you seen, have there been any, I guess this would be a question for Upson as well, methamphetamine labs in the city of Houghton?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there have been, and I mean, actually dating back, before Upset became a thing here, we had a fire at one time in Houghton, and all the firemen were saying, hey, this guy's doing all this stuff that's suspicious, so I ran in there like, well, I gotta go see what this is. And I was like, what am I don't know what I'm looking for. That's when we started calling up people. It is there's a lot of different components, so if somebody cooks meth in an apartment building, it can actually, affect the whole, people in different apartments and stuff like that. So, a lot of them can be as simple as a one cook in a Gatorade bottle. Gatorade bottles are a little thicker than these bottles and they're used. So we, I guess, all have to work together, and that's another thing I think we're gonna have to do is have our upset team go back and work with our local fire departments so that when they respond to a scene. We have had meth labs in the city, and not a lot, but we try to proactively make sure we track it. There's things that we can track, such as like the sale of Sudafed. Sudafed, if they would put it as a prescription, states that have that don't have the amount of people making meth, because you need that as one of the active ingredients, but we can track who is doing that, and that's some of the things that they do, the people that do. So what they'll do is people actually smurf, so they'll go, if somebody asks you to buy a Sudafed, tell them no, it's not a good thing. But they'll have to track those people, and they'll get other people to buy it. That's one of the ways you can find out about that.
More for John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John. Going on, Administrative Subcommittee.
Okay, so I'll preface this by saying that our subcommittee intended probably sometime in the early summer to bring up this topic again, because we didn't see the need for any of the changes we thought were reasonable to happen before where we've traditionally made the changes. They weren't so earth-shattering that we didn't think that we needed to address them before the next fall election. So if that did not meet some people's expectations, I apologize as the chair of that subcommittee. So here I am today to talk a little bit about what we discussed. We actually met 3 or 4 times, I think, 4 at least, right?
Yes.
And what we used as our guide was 2 things. You guys counselors may recall that when this came up and it was decided that the subcommittee was going to discuss it, I asked all the counselors to send me their thoughts and reasoning behind considering these changes, any changes. I heard from one counselor. I will modify that by saying I heard from 4 counselors because there were 3 of us on the subcommittee. I only heard from 1 other counselor that wasn't on the subcommittee, so I appreciated that. In fact, I heard twice from that counselor. I'll try to keep it brief, and then what we can decide, I guess, everybody can kind of probably mull over our commentary, and then going forward, we can discuss it more later if we have to. The first one was, had to do with the consent agenda, which was actually very new because this all came about after our most recent time changing rules of procedure, where we added the consent agenda at the request of one of the counselors. So the request was removed from the consent agenda, bid awards, contract approvals, and lease agreements. We talked about it a few times, but not much. The language of the rules contain a caveat that if any one counselor wants to pull something from the consent agenda as late in the game as at the beginning of the meeting when the agenda is approved, it only takes one counselor to do that. And we thought we could think of some occasions where those things maybe would make sense to be on the consent agenda simply because they may be very routine and not worth any further discussion. So we decided that there was no, we don't think there's any change to the language required in that case. The second one was specifying that future agenda items may be requested by a counselor with the consent of at least one additional counselor. We talked about that a bit and actually kind of arrived, it was kind of organic. And in fact, if everybody listened today while Bob was marching his way down the agenda, we have the line item that is review and approval of the agenda. That is the very first spot where anybody, and historically there hasn't been any roadblock to it, anybody could add something to this meeting's agenda. Eric does it. It's not restricted to just Eric. I believe Bob asked the question, does anybody have anything they want to add to the agenda? And I will deviate a bit. I wasn't going to do this, but the idea that we also have future agenda items item on our each meeting agenda now doesn't necessarily mean that we're always going to bring up something during that period of time. There was a question asked, this was put on, what has happened since? Well, my answer to that is what has happened is whatever the counselors have wanted. There's no roadblock to that. So we didn't really think that there was a reason to add any additional language when we felt like it was pretty open-ended with our existing number 3 on our agenda, our standard agenda. The third item was indicating that the presiding officer may call to order any member who is speaking out of order. So the mayor himself has never, he confirmed, he's never felt as if he couldn't do that, but we felt like this was one that probably was fine to add in case there was any dispute about, wait, what are you doing? Why are you calling me out of order? This only has to do with calling members of the council out of order, not the members of the public. So we can work on the language there, and and our recommendation is before we have our organizational meeting after the fall election, we'll settle in on that language and we'll add it. That would be our recommendation. Fourth item, the public will have opportunity to address the council twice at every meeting. During the opportunity for the public to address the council item on the agenda near the beginning and again near the end of the meeting. We very quickly agreed that we provide enough opportunity for input in a way that has worked, that adding a second opportunity at the end of the meeting, we could think of no positives to that. There would be commentary and discussion about things that had already happened, and there would be no things being brought up that there would not have been preparation to discuss, versus the beginning where not only could that current agenda be discussed, but the prior meeting. We meet every 2 weeks, and our communication lines are open so that people can send in letters or emails anytime, and they can come and speak at the meeting without restriction. So we did not believe that there was any benefit to adding further public comment at the end of the meeting. We'll pause and remind Robert and Bob that if I miss something in here, please speak up. Just because I'm the chair doesn't mean that I want to keep doing all the talking. Fifth item, adding a section specifying how correspondence will be handled. There were some suggestions submitted from a member of the public in that regard. They all seemed mostly fine in general, but we think there would actually be a better way to do it. The suggestion had to do with word count. we suggest that we reduce into writing a description of how we will handle it, and that will include a 5-minute time limit while reading the letter or the email, which is the same as a person here in the chambers would get. That way, whoever that is getting the same amount of time for their words to be heard. We're not going to spend time counting words. If somebody typed up 520 words and they crossed the 500 threshold, then that seemed rather arbitrary. So we would suggest adding some language that would explain that any correspondence sent to the city office with the request that it be read to the council, be read with that same sort of limit as is applied to a member of the public being in the chambers. 6, pardon me, it printed this very small and I'm old. Specifying that committee appointments will be made by the mayor with the consent of a majority vote of the council. This is a wordsmithing thing because it currently says that with the consent of the council. In that sort of language and rules of this type, consent is understood to mean majority. Consent is not one or all. So it's fine, we thought, to add a majority vote chunk of words into the middle of that. It's not going to change what we actually do because our implementation of that has always been consent of a majority. So we will agree on the words that we will slightly add there is our suggestion. And finally, number 7, adding a section specifying how the rules of procedure will be amended. Our charter, and Ann, you can check me as I say this, our charter currently says that we can review and revisit and modify our rules of procedure at our organizational meeting that happens every 2 years after the fall election. Doesn't say that that's the only time. In fact, you all know now it's not the only time because the staff presented some changes to us that the lawyer suggested, which is good. We accept the advice of our legal counsel. So we thought that further specific wording, while wouldn't hurt anything, doesn't really help. There's no restriction. This conversation in itself, I think, kind of explains that there is not just one time. It's not, the rules of procedure are not constantly looked at. And the idea that the every 2 years at the organizational meeting has become the habit, I think, and Ann confirmed this in part, is it's a perfect time to get new members, if there are any, familiar with the rules of procedure. It forces them to look at them right off the bat, which I believe we probably did at the last election. At the very least, they were an agenda item if there were no changes made at the time. I honestly don't remember. So we don't recommend adding any language to what's already there in our charter regarding the rules of procedure. Those were the 7 items. Again, if I didn't report out on that as soon as some folks wanted, I do apologize. This folder has been with me every single time I've walked in this chamber, so I had all these notes. I just had not commented yet. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. Moving along, I would entertain a motion regarding the consent agenda.
So moved.
Support.
Moved and supported to approve our consent agenda. Further discussion.
I just have one question. Eric, I apologize, I was gonna call you, I didn't have time. The item for buses, is that the cost of one bus? That's like first item, top of,
It's on the accounts payable. I believe Jody just got 3 new buses.
oh, okay.
And she will get reimbursed, she's getting,
Yeah.
or she already was reimbursed.
We already got reimbursed.
We're going to launder the money.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's 3 buses.
It's
right at the top. Yeah.
Other,
Well, that's 3 vans.
and help.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Anything else regarding the consent agenda? Will you poll the council?
McGowan?
Yes.
Needham?
Yes.
Suits?
Yes.
Vacken?
Yes.
Cole? Yes. Irizarry?
Yes.
All right, that passes. Moving on to new business, Resolution 2022-1834.
And put together a short memo here as a result of us getting a new auditor. Of course, they're looking at our audit procedures and so forth, and things that, one of the things was we have a pretty antiquated capitalization number of $500 for assets. Any assets acquired by the city have to be capitalized as $500. Standard fare in the modern world is $5,000. Literally could buy a few hand tools and have to capitalize that in our audit, which our auditors recommended that by resolution 2022-1834 recommends capitalizing expenditures of $5,000 or more as recommended by the auditor. I guess, does anybody have any questions on that or the accompanying resolution?
I will,
I'm sorry, I just wanted this will
No,
go into effect for this next fiscal
Yeah.
year. Okay,
Yeah.
this next fiscal year, okay.
Move to approve.
Support.
Okay, move supported to approve Resolution 2022-1834. Further discussion. Will you poll the council?
McGowan?
Yes.
Cole? Yes. Irizarry?
Yes.
Vacken?
Yes?
Needham?
Yes.
Suits?
Yes.
All right, 1834 passes. Next, Resolution 2022-1835.
And what this is basically another pay request resolution. UP Engineers and Architects has an outstanding invoice dated January 6, 2022 of $1,525 for the Phase 3 sewer project, which we would presumably sign off on and send to the USDA for payment.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
It moves supported to approve Resolution 2022-1835. Further discussion. Will you poll the council?
McGowan?
Yes.
Needham?
Yes.
Suits?
Yes.
Vacken?
Yes.
Cole? Yes. Irizarry?
Yes.
All right, that passes. Next, Resolution 2022-1836.
And this would be in regard to the Phase 3 water system improvements project, which again is the College Avenue project. We did get a subsequent invoice from MDOT in the amount of $1,133 and a UP Engineers invoice for $1,034 for a total of $2,167, which would be forwarded to USDA Rural Development for draw on those funds.
Okay.
Move to approve.
Support.
Moved and supported to approve 2022-1836. Further discussion. Will you poll the council?
Suits?
Yes.
Cole? Yes. Irizarry?
Yes.
McGowan?
Yes.
Vacken?
Yes.
And Needham?
Yes.
All right, that passes. Next, EV charging station equipment.
So we did receive that Charge Up Michigan grant from Eagle to install electric vehicle chargers downtown. One thing that we need to do is we need to get that equipment ordered because it does have a lead time on it. And with supply chain right now, we need to get that out there. Now traditionally, we've got the grant agreement, we're all set there. Just wanted to run this by the council and get concurrence that we're gonna place the order for that equipment because, you know, the state of Michigan right now, per the current budget, is gonna put just over $109,000 into this. The city's gonna put 35, and we've got a contribution from the electric utility of 23.5 for a grand total of 167,000. Just over that to be invested in EV charging infrastructure in downtown Houghton. But want to place that order, which is going to cost about $80,000 for the equipment itself, which we're going to have to pay the bill until we get reimbursed from the grant for that. So I guess I'm looking for a motion to sign the purchase order.
Motion to have Eric sign the first order. Make a motion.
Support.
Being moved and supported to approve the signing for Eric. Is there further discussion? Will you poll the council?
McGowan?
Yes.
Suits?
Yes.
Needham?
Yes.
Vacken?
Yes.
Cole? Yes. Irizarry?
Yes.
All right, that passes. And next, New fire department member.
Okay, the fire department's has asked which traditionally the appointments to the fire department do come from the city council, that Brandon Charbonneau be appointed new member to the fire department. Again, there's a little bit of attrition that goes on. I know Councilor McGowan speaks about these younger fellows that come in and kind of carry some of the weight, but a lot of them do graduate or move on to different things sometimes, and so there's a little bit of replacement that has to go on. So that's why it might seem the last, I don't know, it seems like the last 6 months.
Right,
there's
we've
been quite
got
a few new
full
people,
turnover, but, you know, you never know, they might last for 5 years, they might last for 2 years.
or till the co-op comes.
So they're co-op, and, you know, some have become grad students, some have gone and got their PhD, no PhD students
No
yet.
PhDs yet.
Just a couple have got their masters and stuff like that. And also, once we educate them and they get their certificate as a firefighter, they can go down to Ann Arbor, they can go down to Green Bay, and they can be part of that community's fire. So it's not the training, we might pay the training and stuff like that, but we got some young backs that can help us. And each gets them back to see us. Yeah, it's all about the young backs. My back is getting old. I can tell you the chief's back is almost as bad as mine is some days. You know, doing this for 40 years of doing this is getting tired.
If it pleases the council,
Yeah.
for a motion to appoint Brandon Charbonneau to the department.
Brandon Charbonneau.
Move to approve as presented.
Support.
Okay, move supported to appoint Brandon Charbonneau as our newest member to the fire department. Further discussion? Full council.
McGowan, or Needham,
Yes.
Irizarry,
Yes.
Cole. Yes. McGowan.
Yes.
Dakin,
Yes.
Suits.
Yes.
All right, we have a new member to take care of Robert's back. No, tremendous. Hey, it's great that we have a lot of interest. That's us. I mean, the last couple of months, I think we've got 2 new members. We've had 2 new members, you know. 4, excuse me. So, you know, it's nice to see that there's that much interest being shown. It's great. All right, future agenda items.
I have some questions and comments, if I could, Bob.
Sure.
We'll start with a positive thing. 2 weeks from this coming weekend, Michigan Tech Athletics will be hosting a regional cross-country ski race at the trails, so I encourage everybody to come and spectate. It's always a good time, and if you feel so inclined, if you want to volunteer, let me know, because I can connect you with the person who's coordinating the volunteering, since I'm also volunteering. Question, I saw a whole bunch of vans in the subway parking deck. Whose are those?
Those are the ones that we were just talking about.
So how many, there's more than 3 there, eh?
There's 3.
Only 3? Boy, they're just big, I guess. They've been there for a little while, eh?
Yeah, we're waiting for the wrap.
Gotcha. That was kind of my guess, thought I would ask. All right, so now this is just some comments and suggestions from the beginning of the meeting. Anybody, any member of the public that is here or doesn't come to the meetings, I want to, at least for myself, and I think for all of the other counselors here, I want to assure everyone that if you send a communication to us in writing directly, we're reading them. We're not ignoring them. I'm not deleting them. I have every one that I've ever been sent. The idea that comments and suggestions are ignored, I think, is unfortunate. I think it derives from the idea that sometimes a person feels like if they don't get a response or the thing that they have commented or suggested be done isn't done, then somehow that was that meant it was ignored. I have a lot of things on my mind that I know we would never do here, so, and I don't feel ignored if I bring them up and we don't do anything. It's just a matter of consider it, move on. If something's worth further consideration, I think John had an example of something that certainly was, and then it got worked on cooperatively. I also encourage everybody in the public, if they have a question or concern about some city-related thing, a great first step before you make assumptions is to ask Eric as a great point of contact, or Ann, to be honest. We really don't stand on ceremony. Even if you ask any of the department heads, and they're relatively self-evident, chief of police, public works director, take your pick. They're going to answer whatever question or concern you have. They'll say things like, If you have a question about how involved are we with any mental health commissions? Well, as it turns out, I probably do, but I had forgotten that we have somebody that's on the county mental health commission, because I think you probably mentioned it before, just in passing. I try not to come here, and I've done it long enough that I don't. I bug Eric a lot. I call him a lot. He rolls his eyes. Because I try to get answers, and it's usually for me, but it's also often for people that are asking me the questions. So it's there to be found if you go that direction. There was a comment about the procedure we use to fill the planning commission vacancies. We have a procedure for doing it. It's an appointed position. Anybody who's on the planning commission at one point applied. I applied. In fact, I was on the planning commission before I was on city council. There is an application somewhere probably from when I applied to be on council and I was considered and then I was appointed. It's that original application as well as performance and desire to continue that are considered when deciding future appointment. Not trying to put words in your mouth, but you've told me before that that's what you do.
That's right.
So any concern that the fix is in and somebody's just guaranteed to be in, if there's somebody not, I don't believe that the appointment process is going to allow a dysfunctional commission to continue. There will be adjustment. I'm going to stop talking now because it's dinner time. Thank you, Mayor.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yes, sir. The way that I think of future agenda items is that I would make a motion for us to put something on the next agenda. Is that appropriate for me to do? Like I'm going to say I move that we do this next time?
Sure.
Okay.
And you have that option even at the meeting itself. When I ask for review and approval of the agenda, something that you may want to put on at that moment.
Without needing a motion. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Without a meeting, yeah.
Well,
You can
just,
just do it
just, so
without-
we, just so we vote on it. I mean, are we going to be voting on things for this item? So I'm going to say, I move that we do this. Like I would say that we discuss having a mental health subcommittee for having that on the agenda for discussion for our next meeting. Is this an appropriate time to have us vote to say if we want that on the agenda? Or am I just going to say, I want this on the agenda, and then it's like, I don't know, whatever.
Oh,
Have you, if you don't mind, I just have a question. Have you talked about that with John and Eric to talk about what we currently do as a city and whether or not a subcommittee of the council would actually add anything?
This is the part of the discussion that I want us to have. That's why I would make a motion, so if someone says yay or nay, so support them, we just discuss it, and then these are the times that I want to talk about that.
Right
Because-
now, he's just asking to add it to the next agenda,
Sure.
and then you
Put it
discuss
on
it
the
there.
next agenda. Sure.
I mean, one of the reasons why we're discussing it is because I feel like the public would feel more comfortable approaching a member of a subcommittee rather than a member of the police department, maybe that they aren't familiar with. Maybe, yeah, I know this person I voted for, this is something I'd like to see in my community. I feel like it's a little bit more approachable for a member of the public to go to a subcommittee meeting that's open to the public rather than, just finding the person. It makes it more accessible, in my opinion, than having a person within the city office. That's why I would.
I think we should put on the agenda,
So that's what I would
the
like.
next meeting, 2 weeks from tonight.
Yes, please.
We'll go from there. And then if it leads to a subcommittee, then we'll try to put one together.
Very good.
Fair enough?
Yes, sir. I also have, just while we're talking about rules of procedure,
Oh, no.
as part of this discussion, I feel like, I'm one of 7, and if I was to bring up every single amendment or adjustment to the rules of procedure, it might be a long list. I have a long list of things I'd like to adjust on the rules of procedure, but there's a good process for that, and that's why I voted against us changing the rules of procedure earlier. I feel like we should have an organizational meeting where we hammer out the rules of procedures so that the legal counsel has time to be involved, the city manager and the clerk in the office have time to be involved. Because if we're throwing stuff on the agenda at the beginning and it's a surprise to people, and I don't feel like that's a good team thing. And then if I'm thinking of something during the meeting and then I want it on the next meeting. That's a good time for future agenda items as well. So I feel like future agenda items is important, and I feel like having something at the beginning is also useful. But I just want to make sure that I'm not throwing things on like rules of procedure where people are saying, yeah, that's something that, we'll do at the organizational meeting. Because then it's just, this one person just continually making things inefficient.
Isn't it traditionally been done that after the next election, we then set up the rules of procedure?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
So we're talking next November.
Totally.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, sure.
so with all these
Just so
things-
it's clear, I mean,
Yeah, that's what I would support, because when I was a new counselor and I kept asking for a lot of things and I was sending a lot of emails, a good response was, you know what, there's a time in a organizational meeting for this. Let's hold this for that, so that everyone can be involved in the decision-making process. And I feel like that's a good thing. And if we continually just riff on the rules of procedure midway through, then I think things can get messy. And so,
Okay.
that's what I'm going to discuss.
All right, anybody? Any hands? Any other comments? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.